Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard, and each week I share with you my journey of growing food in my allotment and my kitchen garden. I've been growing my own food for over 30 years, and I still believe that everybody should be growing something of what they eat. Now, this week has been dominated by one thing: heat. Relentless, exhausting heat. But even in the hottest of weeks, the garden keeps growing, and so do we. So coming up this week, you're going to be hearing about early morning gardening, watering strategies, edible ponds, cherries by the kilo, drought-tolerant crops, and how much a mulch has once again proven itself to be one of the most powerful tools in the grower's toolkit. So grab yourself a cold drink and let's get into it. Now I'm sat out in my kitchen garden now, and I think it's safe to say that you've probably all noticed that it has been hot this week. And I'm not talking about warm, not just talking about summerish, I mean properly hot. My own garden thermometer picked up a temperature of 36 degrees C this week. But what also made it hot is our humidity. The humidity has been up around the 88%, which means, when we try and sweat, our sweat is just not evaporating and taking away our heat and therefore cooling at the same time. It's just lingering. This has made sleeping very, very difficult. Tossing and turning, and more importantly, waking up incredibly early. And this is all because the house just feels like an oven. But I actually used that waking up early to my advantage, because I decided, it got to about 5:30, I decided I couldn't stay in bed any longer on quite a few mornings this week. Instead, I got up and out into the garden at 6 o'clock in the morning before I leave for work at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I've really enjoyed spending that hour in the garden just before the manic of the day really kicks in. Now, I've really enjoyed just working out in the garden. The birds have been active, the air has been a little bit cooler, but it just feels like I've done something really productive before I've gone to work. Watering has been one of those big jobs this week. Now, for me, watering is quite time consuming because I generally use a watering can, because I like to use rainwater. I don't like to use mains water. Mains water, of course, is much quicker to use. Just attach a hose pipe and sprinkle it round, but it's not very efficient, and I think it's a bit of a waste of water, in my opinion. Rain falls from the sky. We fill up our water butts and we need to use it, but that does mean using a watering can does take a long time. What I've been using lately over the last few months is my Ryobi battery powered water pump, and this has really reduced the amount of time that it takes to water my garden. I simply attach a hosepipe to it and I wander around watering my garden, and it has been an absolute pleasure. I wish I'd done this years ago. Now, I don't water every single bed every single day. Instead, what I do is just give each bed a proper deep soak one day and then move on to the next bed another day. This really does work. What it does is that it encourages the plant's roots to go deep in search of water. Not shallow. If they're at the surface and at the shallow, they need more watering. Instead, deep watering encourages those plants further down. And that means we get stronger, better plants. It's far more effective. It's much better for the plants, and it works really well. Thankfully, I've not made any losses this week. We really have got a really green looking garden overall. Now, where we've been making a few harvests lately, we have got a few gaps. Things like my garlic have came out, and that has left a few gaps. Now, one of the things that I always try and do is fill any gaps. One of the most productive things that we can do is just never have any empty growing space. So just constantly fill up any spaces that we have with our vegetable plants. This means that we don't need a huge garden to really be self-sufficient. It just means we use our space a little bit more efficiently. And I've been filling up a lot of these spaces with things like tomatoes or chilies or peppers, things that I've had growing that need homes, and as space have come available, we've been throwing those in. Now, I've not been worried about the fact that it has been dry. Once we planted each plant in, we've given them all a really good watering in, and we've just kept an eye on them, and they seem to have established quite well. But this brings me on to another area of our garden that I have found to be very, very productive. It is my edible pond area. Now, I've got a little pond in my garden. It's more of a wildlife pond is what it was intended for, because I believe in having natural areas. I want to encourage things like frogs and toads in order to take care of the slug and snail population. But my little pond here, we grow a lot of watercress in there. And it's done okay, I'll be honest, it's done okay, but it has been a little bit neglected. So I've tidied up around the pond, just made it look a little bit better. But what I've also done, when I was at Gardeners World Live last week, I picked up some oxygenating plants. Now I'm hoping that adding these plants are just going to help encourage some of the frogs and toads in to take care of the slugs and snails, because the slugs and snails this year have been pretty bad. And this is all going to help me grow more food. Ultimately, the pond is there. Oh, crikey, a bird just literally flew behind me while as I was talking. Literally, it brushed against my back, so that kind of shocked me for a minute there. The pond is there to grow food. We grow watercress, water chestnuts and things like that. It's only a small pond, but it delivers a lot. And making it edible has been a really, really successful thing for me. And adding even more to this one little pond brings in benefits all around the garden. Now, I've also been trying to tidy up my chicken area. The chickens are great. I really do love having chickens. The compost, the greatness that chickens have, plus the eggs. But their coop does take up quite a large chunk of space. And I just feel that the coop, I love the omelette coop, but it just feels a little bit like it stands out like a sore thumb. It feels a bit like a farm yard corner rather than part of the garden. So I've been just sort of trying to think what we can do to tidy up this area and try and make it look a little bit better, make it more of a feature than just being stuck in a corner. Don't get me wrong, I love having chickens, I really do. I will always have chickens, but I need to incorporate them into the garden just to add it into a more of a garden feel, garden look, than just being, like I say, like a farm corner. This may involve using a decorative fence and things like that, but for now I've just been tidying it up. The chickens have been grateful for any bits of snacks that they can get. That being said, it has been a bit overgrown just in front of them, and I think that has helped shade the chickens out, because it has been hot for the chickens as well. They have been a bit noisy because I think they are getting hot. Now, this brings me on quite nicely to our harvests this week, and we've had a really good week for harvests. We're continuing to pick rhubarb, we're continuing to get raspberries, but we've also harvested a bucket of first early potatoes, which have been very, very welcome, absolutely delicious as well, and very, very pleased to have them. We've also harvested some courgettes. Now, courgettes are something, they seem to really love the heat, but once they start producing, they don't stop. So over the coming weeks, we're going to get a lot of courgettes that we need to use up in some form or another. Now I'm going to head down to the allotment in just a moment, but I will say the heat this week has really made everything quite challenging. But it is pushing me to think more how we want the garden to react, or how we want the garden to perform in a hot summer, while maintaining a vegetable garden but also looking the part as well. Lots of thoughts going on, and sometimes that's what it's all about. Anyway, let's head on down to the allotment where, well, we've had quite a few cherries. But before that, let's find out what's been going on in the Supporters Club this week. Well, I'm just jumping in at this point and saying, if you are enjoying this podcast, then please rate and review on your favourite podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it really helps us out. It really helps us get found by more people. Gets the algorithms working for us. Added to that, if you've also enjoyed this podcast and you want to help support the work that we do, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. For just £5 a month, you get access to extra behind-the-scenes podcasts that give you more of an idea what's going on here at the Veg Grower Podcast HQ. But added to that, once a month you will also receive our seed pack through your letterbox, and that seed pack contains a collection of seeds that I have carefully chosen to be sown in that very month. This means the seeds aren't hanging around waiting to be sown, they can be sown right away. Along with the seeds, you also get a copy of our mini newspaper. Now, this mini newspaper gives you instructions on how to sow those seeds, which I'm told gives people a bit more confidence. But you also get a list of tasks that you can do and a list of other seeds that you can sow throughout that month as well. It becomes a bit of a tool because you can also use it to take down notes from your gardening. It's certainly something that I use myself. Now, if that sounds like something you would be interested in, then please head to the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk to find out more and sign up. But as an example of the seeds that you could expect, we, over this last week, have been sowing radicchio in that seed club. Radicchio is a fantastic vegetable. It gives us really bitter tasting plants that look a bit like lettuce, and they're great in salads. They're nice and crunchy. They're absolutely delicious, and they produce these beautiful blue flowers. So once again, that is something you can find at theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. Well, I'm down on the allotment now, and yeah, it has been very warm down on the allotment as well. But I've got to say, I am really, really impressed with just how well the allotment has coped. I've visited the allotment every evening on the way home from work, and it has been tiring, but I just spent a few minutes mostly focused on watering my plants. Now, I didn't water every single bed every single day. I broke it down into little sections and just really gave each section a really heavy watering. But my plants didn't really need it, to be honest with you. It was more a case that we were just watering to make sure the moisture was in the soil. And the reason I say I don't think my plants really needed it is because they actually coped quite well with all the mulches that we have applied. The straw mulch has really worked wonders. My potatoes, they did not look thirsty at all. And normally they are one that really do need quite a bit of water. Everything else just coped fine, even newly planted plants. So I'm a big fan of mulches, and this week has really proven just how well a mulch makes an allotment all the more manageable. I mainly use straw here in the allotment because it's cheap and I can easily get hold of it. I would love to use compost, but we can't produce enough compost. But whatever it is, we're going to continue using it. It has made such a big difference in this heat. I cannot sing the praises enough of using a good mulch. Now, that's not all we've done this week. One of the big things that has happened this week is I've been harvesting my cherries. Now, these are Morello cherries. I've got a Morello cherry tree tucked up in the corner of my allotment, and this was one of the first plants I ever planted. And it has done wonders over the years, provided us with plenty of cherries. This week, I've harvested 6 kilos of these delicious red cherries. Now that is plenty. We beat the birds, although the birds did have a few, but we have got plenty of cherries in our freezer, which we're going to be using into jams and pies and things like that. So really, I'm very, very, very happy with the amount of cherries that we got. It's been a great little harvest. But what I'm really pleased about is that now we've harvested our cherries, we've been able to prune our cherry tree. Now, obviously, I didn't do this in the evenings after work. I did this on the weekend when I got down to the allotment early in the morning, just because it's that much cooler. And I just did a few hours on the allotment, and pruning my cherry tree was one of those big, important jobs. Now, we don't prune stone fruits during the winter because the risk of silverleaf disease is very, very high. So we save that for the summer, and I like to do it after fruiting. Cherries are normally the first, but nectarines and peaches will follow in time as well. And all I've done is, much like when I've pruned my apples and my pear trees, is I've gone to each tree and I've pruned away the 3 Ds: dead, diseased or damaged branches. Once that's done, we stand back and take a look and just make sure we got no crossing branches, and if we do, we prune those out. And any branches that are just going to allow a bit of air, bit of light through the tree as well, and then overall the shape. Now the cherry tree looks fantastic for it. It's really tidied it up. The cherry tree itself is a pretty hardy tree. I have to say it's done very, very well over the years, and it keeps performing well. So with a bit of TLC from time to time, it will make all the difference. Now, other notes that I've noted on the allotment this week is that everything is growing well. We've recently harvested all our garlic, and that's in the greenhouse and drying off. But our onions are soon going to be following. I've even got onions that I've grown from seed, which are going to be in the ground for a little bit longer, but they seem now to be really putting on their bulk. Added to that, my beans and my tomatoes are really putting on some good growth as well. So everything is really into full spring. I'm really happy with it. One of the other things I'm really happy with is my squash plants, my pumpkins and my courgettes. Now, we are harvesting a few courgettes from time to time. It's soon going to be a point that we're going to end up having way too many courgettes than what we're going to know what to do with. But most of my squash plants are planted in my straw bale garden, and they took a while to really get established, but now they are doing really well. They're putting on plenty of growth, putting on flowers, and they're just looking really healthy. I do have a few more plants that I need to find homes for, and some of these are going to go in compost bins and things like that. Now, despite the heat, I've also planted out some more sweet corn. Now, sweet corn is something that I want to grow a lot of, and I've sown several batches of sweet corn, and this batch, it was time to go in. So pretty simple really to plant sweet corn. So when I sow sweet corn, I tend to do it in cells, and then I pop them up as they grow. And once they are, a good 20 to 30 centimetres tall, I feel they are strong enough to cope with going into the ground. And all I do is I take them out the pot and drop them into the ground, give them a good watering in, and they seem to establish. Now, the important thing with sweet corn, as always, is to plant it in a block. Sweet corn is wind pollinated, so it needs the wind to shake the plant in order for the pollination to happen. It's not pollinated by bees or pollinators like we normally think of most plants. Wind is what it's needed, and that's why we plant it in a block, so that a neighbouring plant can pollinate the other. It works quite well. It does work quite well. These are actually planted in my smaller beds to the back of my greenhouses, and they're looking really healthy. My earlier plants that were planted a month or so ago, they are looking really good. They've got on so much growth again over this last week as well. Growth is really the sign that I'm seeing this week, despite the heat. So, yeah, overall, I'm really pleased that the allotment has coped really well with this heat. One of the biggest problems, of course, is finding the time to work on the allotment when it is so hot. The last thing we want to do. And that's why I found that breaking it down into smaller chunks on a daily basis made a real difference. 20 minutes, I could just about cope with the heat before heading home. Of course, making sure I had plenty of fluids with me to make sure I didn't dehydrate myself. But yeah, it really has worked. Working early in the morning as well has made a big difference as well. Although I will say, in normal weekends we probably would have done a lot more, but sometimes you just have to work with the conditions that we have. And then in terms of harvests, more rhubarb, the cherries I've already mentioned, more broad beans, and some potatoes as well. So overall, really, again, very productive. Well, I'm going to head on home into the podding shed, and I want to talk a little bit more about how we are going to have to think more about coping with hot summers. In the meantime, let's find out what's going on in the kitchen this week.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef Scott with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feet feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
This week's recipe is a really easy one, but it's still tasty. It doesn't involve any cooking because it is a tomato and herb summer salad with chickpeas. Now, I've grown chickpeas from seed before quite successfully, and I have to say this year I wish I'd done them because they would be very, very successful. However, for this salad, all you need is some fresh tomatoes, some mixed herbs, some chickpeas, which can come from a can, some olive oil, some lemon juice, and salt and pepper. All you do is simply chop the tomatoes and herbs into nice, small, bite-sized pieces. Rinse the chickpeas off to get rid of any excess salt or liquid. Pot them all in a bowl together. Give them a good mix. Drizzle with a little olive oil. Squeeze in some fresh lemon juice. And then season with a bit of salt and pepper, and it's ready to go. This is really easy to make, no cooking really involved, but also very, very tasty. And at the moment, I am eating a lot of salads, so I'm always looking at imaginative ways to try and make better salads. Now, over this last week, obviously, the heatwave here in the UK has very much dominated the news. But it's also dominated everything going on in this podcast. And because this is a gardening podcast, in particular, a Grow Your Own podcast, it's got me thinking that if this continues and if it carries on year after year, we're going to have to change the way that we garden, or at least think about changing the way that we garden. Now, I say that because every summer for the last few summers, it feels like we're getting hotter and hotter with record-breaking temperatures every single year. And this is really bearing out in our gardening. I was watching Clarkson's Farm the other day and I saw that he was showing examples of how much his crops are smaller, his wheat crops, his straw crops. And this is bearing out in the vegetable gardens I'm noticing as well. Now, for farmers, it's not so easy to take a break, but they also are very much at the whim of the weather more than we are as gardeners. And I say that because as gardeners, it's a little bit easier to water our small gardens compared to acres and acres of land. Now, watering is only one of the small problems because the heat doesn't just mean that we have to water our plants more. Some of our plants do struggle to cope with the heat. I look at my cucumbers in the greenhouse and they've started to turn a shade of yellow, which happened last year as well. It's not through lack of feeding, it's just the heat has started to give it some effects. Lettuce has a tendency to bolt, as do many other crops. And this means that we have to think about how we're going to deal with crops that don't like the heat. So where do we start? Where do we start? I always think the first thing that we've got to think about is working smart. Now, over this last week, I've been working in the cooler parts of the day, early morning, late evening, drinking plenty of fluids as I've gone along, wearing sunscreen and a hat. This is something I've talked about a lot over many summers. I think it is so important that if we're going to go out in the garden, we've got to put ourselves first. We've got to look after ourselves, and taking all these precautions is a must. Following on from that, of course, if we have animals or even wildlife, we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to, one, keep themselves cool, but plenty of fresh water as well. This goes from my chickens to bird bath, ensuring every day that they're all topped up with fresh water. That's pretty much been the top of my list. And it doesn't just stick to chickens and bird baths, dogs, pets, everything else. We need to make sure they have plenty of fresh water. Now, one of the things I'm very good at is storing lots of rainwater. I've got 16 water butts in my garden, and over winter they all fill up really nicely. But what I'm noticing is that we are running out a little bit more of water. So we have to think, what are we going to do? How can we get some more rainwater? How can we boost the amount of rainwater that we can capture? I'm thinking about getting an IBC container, industrial bulk container, in my garden. That'll hold 1,000 litres, which is pretty much equivalent to 4 more water butts. I do think this is going to be a big step forward. I think that's going to really enable us to store more water. but these things are a metre square, so they take up quite a bit of space. I would love to put this underground. Absolutely love to put this underground. And I think the way with our summers are going, water storage is just going to become more and more important. So perhaps in the future, if we ever do something in a garden, knock down one of the sheds or our summer house, we may start submerging some underground water tanks, just so then we have some more ways of storing more water. Now, I mentioned plants that don't like the sun. They don't like getting hot. Things like lettuce. Now, we can easily help these out by putting up some shade cloth, just to offer them a bit of shade to keep them a little bit cooler. I also think it's a good idea in the summer to keep these in shadier parts of our garden, just to give them more of a chance to cope with the heat. Unfortunately, even in the shade, it still does get hot, but with a good watering regime, making sure that they do stay moist at the base, keeping them in the shade, they stand more of a fighting chance. But then we have to think about drought-tolerant edibles, because I do think this is where we may have to go in the future. It's going to be very tricky as food growers because our choices are going to be a little bit limited. All plants are going to need water, but we do have a few options that can be very useful in our gardens. The Mediterranean herbs are straight away one of the first things that springs to mind. Things like rosemary, thyme, sage. They can cope with a bit of a drought. They still need a bit of water, but they can cope with a bit of a drought. Chickpeas, which came up in the recipe this week. Now, I've grown chickpeas before. They do need a really good summer, and I keep meaning to grow them again. This summer, they would have been very, very successful, so I'm kind of kicking myself for not sowing those before. But chickpeas are absolutely brilliant at coping with droughts. Borlotti beans, which is something I am growing this year, they can also be fairly drought tolerant. Once they get going, once they're established, they can pretty much go quite low to find any water. Perennial vegetables are also a good choice. Things like globe artichokes, cardoons, asparagus. They can actually tolerate the drought a little bit more, not forgetting things like our fruit trees and bushes. The main reason being is that they are anchored in the ground. They have their roots going deep into the ground and they're very difficult to remove. So therefore, they're going to cope with droughts a little bit better. Again, all these drought-tolerant plants are going to need a bit of water. They're just going to cope with drier summers more. We also have deep-rooted crops such as salsify and scorcenia, which I've grown both of these. They're pretty good. They're not often used in the vegetable garden, but I think they're going to be something that we use more. We've also got squashes. Now, certain squashes can cope quite well with drought, and that is going to help in the future as well. They also have a shading effect where they shade the soil out, so that could be used to their advantage. Amaranth and New Zealand spinach are the final two on my list of drought-tolerant edibles. So these crops, they just don't survive the heat. They thrive in it, and they will do really, really well in the future if we continue getting summers like this. But if you've got anything that you think survives drought, then let me know. Now, the real hero of the week, however, has been the mulch. And for me, this has made a really big difference this year. I go on about mulching all the time. My motto is mulch, mulch and more mulch, because it is so good. I follow the no-dig principle in which we add compost on top of our beds, our soil. But compost does have a bit of a wicking effect, but it is a good mulch nonetheless. The straw mulch on the allotment has really shown its colours. It has really done well. I'm looking at my potatoes and thinking, you don't even look like you're thirsty. And it's the same at home. We've got a mix of mulches that we have tried, and Strulch is one example. We've also got things like Marvellous Mulch. We've got mulch from Rocket Grow. These have all been used in the vegetable garden with great success, and it really has saved the garden, saved the allotment. It's kept the moisture in, it's kept the roots cool, and it's reduced the stress on the plants. So if you take one thing from this episode, then please think of it that mulch is your best friend in a heat wave, but also helps cope with a large garden or allotment. Mulch, mulch, mulch. Well, that brings us up to the end of this week's podcast. I'd just like to say, if you've enjoyed this podcast, then please do leave a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it really means the world to us. And I've had a lovely review this week from Lynn on Spotify. She says, "Hi Richard, I just wanted to say I've made some more of your chili sauce that you gave the recipe for. Can't live without the stuff, and it's also lovely to hear you chat with Lucy and Saul this week. Their podcast and yours are the only ones I never miss. Hope you are surviving the heat." Thank you, Lynn. I really appreciate that. Yeah, and I hope you survived the heat as well. And it's lovely to talk to Lucy and Saul. I have so much time for those two. They're really good people as well. Now, added to that, if you want to help support this podcast, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club, which you can find at the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk, which is, of course, our website. While you're on our website, leave us a comment on the bottom of a blog post or leave us a voicemail. You can also email me if you want to get in touch, richard@theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. Alternatively, you can find me on social media. And if you're finding me on social media, you might as well give us a follow and a like. Well, that just about brings us up to the end of this week. Thanks so much for listening. We will be back again next time. So until then, please take care. And most importantly, stay cool.